Okay, I'm starting with Trapper. So Trapper is Evan McMillan, and he was the son of Archie McMillan. And he was raised under Archie's firm hand, and in turn he ran his workforce on the McMillan estate with a firm hand as well. And Evan really idolized his father, and as Archie's mental health started declining, he, I guess, asked more and more ridiculous things, and Evan just did whatever he asked, which eventually made them both into mass murderers. Like, they would lead a lot of men into the dark tunnels in the estate, and they would detonate explosives and kill them. Archie McMillan was found dead in his own warehouse, and Evan was nowhere to be found, where we can kind of assume that he was taken by the entity and went into the fog.
Well, I think essentially, the only thing is I think that, like, it's trying to say is that, like, he was raised under his firm hand, which to me probably means, like, he beat the shit out of him, abused, so he just, like, did whatever his dad said. So I think they're trying to make it like, oh, well, like, his dad went crazy and, like, his dad wanted to kill people, so, like, he just did whatever to, like, make his dad happy.
Yeah. And then he killed his dad?
I don't believe that anyone who can do that can be mentally stable.
Yeah, and then he
Where
killed
does it
his
say he
dad,
killed his dad?
That's what I'm assuming, because it says, like, his father is an unsolved puzzle found dead and abandoned. Like, who else would kill him, you know?
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true.
So as far as his story goes,
I think this is believable.
I would
because,
put it
like,
in
I do
maybe,
think, like,
like,
kids who are abused
can, like, do
like,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd probably put it in, like, A or B.
Yeah, I would say B, just, like, right in the middle. Like, because I think it's a good story. Like, oh, okay, that's cool. But it's not like, oh my god, that's crazy. And it's not like, wow, why did I read this, you know?
Okay. The Wraith is Philip Ojomo, and he was an immigrant who got a job at Auto Haven Wreckers. And he kind of knew that there was a little bit of shady crime dealings going on, which the police overlooked, and he was okay with that. He just focused on his work, which was scrapping cars. And one day he was scrapping cars and he realized that there was a person inside, and that eventually led to the realization that all of this time that he had been crushing cars, there had been people inside, and he had been an executioner without realizing that that's what he was being forced to do. And this realization made him absolutely lose it, and he threw his boss into the crusher and killed him, and he eventually disappeared, which is where we again can assume that he went into the fog. I can see him going
it's like too far
over that.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, A maybe?
It's 2 because it's Wraith.
Dude, this is like the only time he can go in S.
Dude, personally, I thought it was like, for me, the fact that you made me gasp when you were reading that, I feel like that's like A tier for sure, at least.
At least A tier. Yeah.
I think it was a really good story. Just like the fact that like he killed people without like knowing, you know?
Yeah, I'll
it's like so sketchy.
Okay, Hillbilly. Oh
okay.
God. He's already yelling. Anyways, Billy is Max Thompson Jr., and ever since he was born, he was kind of hidden away from the world. His parents actually locked him into a room and they fed him through a hole. And the reason for this is because he was disfigured and he had unloving parents, I guess, who were embarrassed of him. And eventually one day he escaped and he slaughtered his parents to get revenge. And he was really scarred, and he spent his life on the farm killing and torturing animals until one day he vanished, where we can assume that he went into the fog. I feel like I would put this in S.
That was in S?
Yeah, I feel like it's so good. I don't know. I'm thinking it's S because it's like, it makes it very believable that like he would turn into a killer.
That's true.
Compared to like Trapper, I don't know, like Trapper was like had less of a reason to become a killer than this guy.
I think no, this is actually really good. You're right, because I think like the whole fact that they were like ashamed of him, they like locked him up, and then he was like, "Fuck this, bro."
Yeah, I feel like it's like understandable that he would become a killer. That's why I would put it in S. The nurse is Sally Smithson, and she moved into a house with her husband that he had built. But one day he had an accident or something at his job, and she found out that he was dead, and she realized that she had to provide for herself. So she started working at Crotus Pren Asylum, and it was really traumatizing for her dealing with all of the patients there. Like, there was a lot of horrible things that she saw. And one day she started having these thoughts of purification, and basically one morning all staff arrived and they found 50 dead patients and some staff members also dead. And here we can assume that Sally had lost it and had killed them. And she had survived the night, and they tried to get her into an ambulance and go to another hospital with her, but eventually that ambulance was found crashed, all the staff were dead, and Sally was nowhere to be found, where we can assume she went into the fog. Okay, I hate this one.
I mean, it was okay, you know?
I don't know. But here's the thing. The thing that bothers me, I think, about it is that so many people, like, work in, like, asylums and hospitals and stuff, and, like, I mean, it's, like, really mentally straining, but, like, I don't think they, like, go insane and kill people.
Oh, it's, like, I get what you're saying. It's kind of just, like, oh, if you work, like, in a mental asylum, like, all those people are so shitty that you feel like you need to, like, clean them.
Yeah.
Like, clean the world of them or whatever.
I don't get it.
Very
the purification thing, like, that's so, like, I don't know.
So when it says that the foreman paid him a visit, does that mean that her husband died?
That's what I'm thinking. So, I mean, it could be like, he died, so she was, like, already traumatized, and then, like, on top of that, like, seeing this. So it kind of, like, added that, I feel like, to make it a little bit more believable, but I would still put this at, like, C or D, probably.
Honestly, I don't know if any of these are gonna be, like, D, because I don't think this writing's, like, terrible. Like, I think the fact that they even did backstories is kind of cool.
Yeah, probably C, I think, for her.
Yeah, it's like okay, but it's just kind of like, nurse goes crazy because she can't handle the job. Like, I feel like there's a lot more steps.
Yeah. So the Huntress is Anna, and she, as a child, would live with her mom, and her mom raised her alone in the northern woods, and she taught Anna how to survive. Her mom made her toys and masks, told her stories, sang her lullabies, and then one day they went out to hunt an elk. And the elk actually charged at Anna, but Anna's mom protected her. And she did manage to kill the elk, but Anna's mom actually passed away from the elk attack, leaving Anna completely alone. So Anna was isolated, and she grew up in the forest by herself, just surviving with whatever her mom had taught her. And she would kill animals, and like she would kill bigger and bigger prey, and eventually she started actually killing humans. But she had a thing that where she couldn't kill little girls, I guess maybe because it reminded her of herself. So she always took the little girls back to her house, and she tried to care for them and give them toys and books. But they would always die from, like, the conditions, I guess. And every time one of these girls died, Anna was getting more and more depressed, and she started raiding villages and trying to kidnap little girls. And there were some wars that were happening, and eventually the war chased the villagers away, and she targeted soldiers and stuff. And then when the war ended, the Huntress also disappeared, where we can assume that Anna went into the fog.
Okay, this is definitely where they, like, hired a new writer.
I know, that was so, like, long and, like, descriptive.
It was, like, random because I'm like, how did they go from, like, we don't even know if Nurse's husband is dead? And then, like, all of a sudden they're, like, telling us, like...
Like, the antlers snapped with a sickening crack or something.
Yeah,
like
I liked it.
It's a little bit intense. Like, the fact that she, like, went from, like, killing animals to killing people? Instead of asking people for help?
Well, the hard thing about that is, like, how far apart was that, you know? Like,
maybe she went crazy over time, yeah.
Because she was just, like, trying to survive, you know, and she, like, didn't know. Like, I think it's cool. I really like it.
But it was good. It's just, like, I don't know, I'm still, like, struggling with, like, that whole killing animals to killing people and then kidnapping little girls and then them dying. I don't know. It's a little weird.
Well, that's kind of true because, like, if she can keep herself alive, why can't she keep another
the girls
kid alive?
Yeah.
I think if I kept reading it, there'd be too many plot holes.
If you don't think about it too long.
I know.
I don't know.
It's okay,
like,
but I think...
Yeah, maybe like I don't know. B, maybe? I mean, or B or A.
I don't know. I kind of think B, like, it's okay. It's not the worst. It's also not the best.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
The only one thing I do like, though, is that, like, her humming was, like, what her mom sang to her before, like, her mom died, you know? Like, that's kind of cool.
I don't know. Maybe I should put it in A, actually. Yeah. Okay, I'll put her in A.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Herman was handpicked for special training and
His name's Herman.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, but I'm never calling him the doctor again. His name's just gonna be Herman forever.
You'll like, who's the killer? And you'll be like, Herman. The doctor is Herman Carter, and he had an aptitude for psychology, and he did some special training at Larry's Memorial Institute, which was a front for the CIA. And he met a doctor there, and under his guidance, Herman began to use a lot of vicious methods to extract information from prisoners. And his methods became more and more violent, like electroshock therapy and things like that. And over time, he became known as the doctor, and no one even questioned his credentials anymore, or like what happened to the prisoners after they gave them information. After Larry's Memorial Institute went quiet for a week, it was finally discovered that all of the personnel and patients and prisoners were found dead with a lot of head trauma, and including the doctor that had been training Herman, and there was no sign of Herman. So here we can again assume that he went into the fog. I would say, I don't know, like, I mean,
I don't think it's that good.
I don't like this at all, because it's just like, you know, no one questioned his certificates and stuff, and like what made him kind of be using these vicious methods in the first place, unless he was already kind of bad. Like, he was like good in psychology and stuff, so I don't know. I'd put this in like,
this is like, there's like no reason for him to be like evil. It was just like,
oh, he felt like it kind of thing.
Yeah, and then it was just like, oh, like the USA just like brings in people and they just like electroshock them, and then this one dude was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna kill everybody here.
Yeah, I don't know. I almost want to put him in D.
Yeah, that was actually, this is terrible.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? You should put him in C just because his name choice was so good that it bumps him up to Herman.
Oh my god,
the killer, Herman Carter.
The spirit is Ren Yamaoka, and she was a hardworking girl in university. Her family had a lot of financial struggles, and her dad really wanted to provide for the family, so he felt like he had a lot of pressure on him. He worked a lot of shifts to try to get a promotion, and at one point he begged his boss for a bonus or advance or anything, but they weren't able to give him anything. And at one point the company used him as a fallback for, you know, they blamed all their failures on him, and they actually fired him after he had worked for 22 years. And this is the moment where he snapped, and when Rin came home, she found her dad actually killing her mom. Like, her mom was getting dismembered by her dad. And when she walked in on this, her father turned his attention to her and attacked her. And she was kind of fighting him off, and he was slicing her everywhere with his katana. And then as she died, she made an oath for blood and revenge against her father.
I liked it. I thought that was cool. I thought it was kind of weird how specific they were, like, about the actual murder. Like, why was that, like 90% of it?
I feel like the reason they did that is to, like, explain every single one of the gashes
of her gashes, yeah.
Which I feel like is a little
Which
bit
I think that's cool.
unnecessary, but it's kind of, at least it, like, explains it. But she didn't kill her dad, right? Like,
I think they're trying to make it more, like, into DBD that's, like, oh, like, she made an oath, and like that's why she's here, and like she's like bloodthirsty and like wants revenge against her dad, and so like that's why she's in the fog. Like, I think that's they're trying with the newer kill, because it's like a newer killer, so I think they're trying to like tie it more into DBD, whereas like with the first ones they really didn't.
Yeah.
As much.
Essentially, her dad had like a debt, and that kind of like made him start losing it. That's the other thing, though. The fact that him just getting, like, fired and stuff, like, made him go over the edge, like, and kill her mom?
Yeah, that's kind of, like, the part that's kind of, like,
sketchy. It's a little bit
extreme.
Yeah, I think that's, like, the difference for me between it going in S or it going in A.
Huh?
Yeah. Legion is a combination of Frank, Julie, Susie, and Joey. So the backstory kind of starts with Frank, who was a teenager with a very rough history of going through a lot of foster homes and lashing out. And he ended up with a foster dad who used to drink a lot, and he used his family services checks to pay for drinks. Frank caught the attention of Julie, and they formed this kind of friend group of Frank, Julie, Susie, and Joey. And they would hang out a lot together, and Frank kind of tried to get the others into some like vandalism and theft. And then one day they were vandalizing a store, but one of the cleaners was still there and who grabbed Julie. And something just took over Frank, and he stabbed the cleaner. And then everybody in the group like took turns each stabbing the cleaner once until he was dead. And they went to Mount Ormond to dispose of the body, and eventually they were never found. Like, they never returned home, and everybody had different thoughts on what happened to them. And the cleaner's body was found in Mount Ormond, but the kids were nowhere to be seen, where we can assume they went into the fog. Them just all going along with it is like really unlikely, in my opinion. Like, I can understand like getting like one or two people maybe to go along with you, but getting that many people on board to kill someone, I feel like at least one person wouldn't.
I think that the hard thing about that though is like, it wasn't like that they wanted to kill, like they probably didn't know, you know, and like when they're like in front of you, it's like either like, oh, if I don't stab this guy, it's gonna murder me too, you know? Like, how scared are you of this guy? Because it's like, if obviously Frank was just like gonna stab him and he was like, finish the job, it's like, oh, okay, like either I do this or I die, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things, like they're always bound together. I don't really understand how this like one thing makes them like serial murderers, you know?
I feel like in a movie this would be like, they would kill this guy and then they'd be like, oh my god, what have we done? And they would try to hide it, and then they would try to go back to normal life. Like, I don't think they would like become like killers forever.
I think you're right. Like, I think that if this was a movie, it'd be one of those things of them like trying to get back to their normal life and like ignoring each other like after just having done something crazy.
Yeah. I don't know, it was really like detailed, and I kind of like that it's like a group thing instead of just like one killer. But I don't know, maybe like A. Like,
I think A is a good one, because it's like not the best one, but it's definitely like, I think it's like well written.
Yeah, for like the level of detail and stuff, and like the number of people involved. Like, I feel like it's like A. Oni was Kazan Yamaoka, and he wanted to surpass his father's reputation, and he was really passionate about samurai culture, and he didn't like that people posed as samurai. So he kind of went on a rampage to rid Japan of imposters, and he killed them very, very brutally. And eventually the lord started calling him Oni Yamaoka, which means the rageful samurai, which he perceived as an insult. And now Kazan started butchering anyone that called him that name because he really hated that insult. And there was one time where he found himself face to face with a samurai who was trying to attack him. And he realized the samurai was actually his dad, and he ended up killing his father. I think his father had been trying to kill Kazan because he realized how off the deep end he had gone. But Kazan ended up killing his father. And then after that, he became really mentally distraught, even more so. He sought out the Lord who had come up with the nickname, and he pulled out his tongue. And then after that, a mob actually found him, and they basically attacked him to death, tortured him, and left him to die a slow death. And when they came back after that, they saw that his body was covered with fog, and basically he was taken by the entity into the fog. It says Oni is one of Spirit's ancestors.
Oh, it just says it's an ancestor, yeah.
Okay. So, the thing is, though, that he, like, just killed people, like, for no reason from the very beginning.
No, because they bullied him.
No, that was before, even before that. Like, they began to call him that because he was killing people already. Yeah. So, like, I have, like, zero sympathy for him, I feel like. Because, like, he was killing people.
Back to the sympathy.
It's true, though. He was just killing people for no reason, and then they like started calling him Rageful Samurai, and then he was insulted and killed more people.
Yeah, this is kind of like sketchy. The only weird thing is I feel like they really did a lot of detail for them to just be like, yeah, he was just an asshole. Like, there was so much detail and they could have just said that. Like, he just felt like killing people.
There was so much detail to the story, like, about how he killed people and how he yanked out the tongue of the Lord. So, I mean, he definitely doesn't have any story where, like, he had anything, like, traumatic happen to him or anything. Like, he was kind of, like, the one that was, like, traumatizing other people, I feel like.
Yeah, like, he was just, like, bad for, like, no reason.
I don't know. I'd almost put that in, like... This is the hard thing, though. I don't know if I don't like the story or if I don't like Oni, you know? Like...
Yeah.
The level of detail in the story was, like, pretty intense.
Well, one, the fact that it's, like, connected to Spirit at all is kind of cool. Like, that they're, like, connecting killers' backstories to each other.
Yeah.
Even if they're, like, generations apart. But then also in my head, I'm like, they were so lazy they didn't want to make a map.
That's probably, like, true. I would put it in B because, like, it had, like, a pretty good level of detail, but, like, his story isn't, like, believable enough to be, like, A or S for sure.
Yeah, I think that it's, like, the detail is good in it, you know, but at some point, like, detail only gets you so far without substance. Like, where's the substance? I agree with B. I think that's a good rating for sure.
Deathslinger was Caleb Quinn, and he was the son to struggling Irish immigrants. Caleb's dad kind of got him into tools, and over time Caleb started making devices, but the devices he made were actually kind of messed up. Like, they were torture devices concepts. Like, he had plans for a mask that would gouge needles into someone's eyes and rip them from their sockets, which he had fitted for boys who bullied him. But he did have really stellar engineering abilities, so Henry Bayshore, the owner of United Westrail, hired him, and Caleb invented a bunch of devices for Bayshore. But over time, the devices began turning up at other companies, so the patents were pretty much stolen from Caleb when he came up with these devices. And he got really mad about it, and he tried to kill Bayshore with his signature gun, which is like the Deathslinger gun. Bayshore actually ended up surviving, so Caleb ended up going to jail, where he kind of made a connection with the prison warden. And the prison warden let him go from jail in turn if he promised that he would bring a lot of outlaws to the jail. And that would help the prison warden basically make money and become rich. And the prison warden pulled some strings and released some inmates to help Caleb have a posse, and he had a gang. And they went around for a couple years collecting outlaws for the prison. And then one day he noticed that Bayshore actually purchased the jail. And he got really, really mad about that because he realized that he was just a pawn. So the gang actually pledged their loyalty to Caleb, and they went in to kill the warden, severely beat up Bayshore and the warden both, and left them begging for death. And then Caleb went back to his old cell and sat on his bed, and the fog started to take him.
Well, this one is kind of like the nurse then, you know? Like, they could have summarized it to, like, yo, the job made me crazy.
Yeah, it's like, literally, like, yeah, but he already had kind of, like, a weird kind of beginning, because even as a kid, he was, like, randomly trying to design, like, torture devices for his bullies.
His bullies?
I feel like that's a little bit extreme. I mean, there's a lot of, like, the thing is, like, this lore is, like, really, really, like, detailed.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I gotta put him again in, like, at least B, because, like, if you're comparing it to, like, doctor or nurse.
I think it's a good story, just kind of like how he was just, like, tired of people just, like, treating him like shit and, like, his bullies and everything, and I think that at least...
Probably B.
Yeah, I think B.
Tag is Lisa Sherwood, and she began her life in an isolated village, and the elders of the village taught her charms for safety and good fortune. But there was one day when she was coming home, and in the forest, she ended up getting kidnapped by cannibals, and she was locked into their basement, and she was basically tortured for a long time, and kidnappers would carve bits off of her and eat them. But after some time, she was able to get out of her shackles, and in that process, she did end up injuring herself. And while she was laying there dying, she thought of what her elders had taught her, and she etched some symbols. And when she etched those symbols, she ended up making like a oath of vengeance. And that gave her basically power to... She went and killed all of the people that had been holding her captive, and she disappeared. So obviously she was taken into the fog.
I mean, this one, like I said, this one's like kind of simple, but I think it's good, you know, because just like, you know, she was abused and then became a murderer. That seems to be pretty much like the theme.
Yeah, I would still put her in C. It's really...
I think that it's just very basic. Like, I was abused, I got revenge. I was abused, I got revenge. Now I'm a murderer.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's everybody.
Blight is Talbot Grimes, and he started experimenting with things as a child. So, for example, he was experimenting with foxglove on himself, and that kind of continued into his adult years, where he turned it into an ambition to use these methods to kind of develop medicine. He did come up with a chemical that increased productivity while reducing need for rest, and he was rewarded with a lab at his work. And in turn, he created another drug that allowed soldiers to withstand a lot of pain. And there were minor side effects, but there were some rumors that soldiers were going crazy from that and massacring people. And then one day, there was someone that hit him in the back of the head and loaded him into a wagon. And from that, he found out that actually his productivity increasing drug had killed like a whole factory worth of people. And he had just been abducted by someone that was really angry about it. And he was almost killed and left for dead by this person that was really mad at him for this. But from the edge of death, he was brought back, and he was actually brought back by some monks at a monastery. He was helping these monks with expanding their mind to other dimensions, but kind of the closer and closer that he got to enlightenment, these monks were getting kind of skeptical of him, and eventually they kind of started sedating him. I'm not really sure why, so if anyone knows, definitely let me know why exactly they were doing this, but from my interpretation, I think they were kind of afraid of what he was going into, like what kind of phase he was going into with all of his enlightenment thoughts. And then eventually he did actually have a breakthrough, and he went into the fog, and he left behind the line over and over written along the walls, "Death is only the beginning." So that one's pretty intense, I feel like.
Yeah. I like that one, actually.
Yeah, I do like that one. Like, I feel like I might put that in S.
I definitely think that I would put that in S too, because I think that, like, I do like that this one's, like, different. Because then, like, all of them, it's like, oh, he was abused, blah, blah, blah. But this one is just kind of like, hey, he was, like, a researcher, but, like, he just, like, took his work, like, too far. Like, trying to, like, make people, like, more productive and, like, not tired and, like, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like
he was, like,
oh,
trying
shit,
to
like,
help,
I did this.
and then it just, like, went way too far, and he, like, understood that, too, in a way, so...
Yeah. I think that's really cool, because I think that's, like, definitely different.
Clown is Kenneth Chase, and he was originally born with a difficult labor, and his mom did not survive, and that actually drove a rift between him and his dad, because his dad kind of resented him for that, and his dad also got into drinking a lot. And in order to distract himself from, you know, I guess the torture of this situation, Kenneth was really into feathers. Like, he would find feathers on the ground and he would collect them. And over time, they almost became an obsession, and he started to trap birds, and he meant to just look at them, but instead he ended up killing them. And over time, this obsession grew more and more, and he was starting to use anesthesia on squirrels, raccoons, and dogs. And he would basically use anesthesia on them and then kill them. And he would dismember them, and he would put all of this stuff into a cigar box. And one day his dad actually found the cigar box and saw it had feathers, animal paws, and even a man's finger. And when Kenneth returned home, he realized his dad knew what he'd done, and he actually turned around and he left and never went home again. Eventually, he joined a traveling circus and he assumed a new identity of Jeffrey Hawk. And for a while, he was trying to drink and do drugs and try to keep himself distracted, but that did not work enough for him. And he ended up going back to his old ways of using anesthesia on people and then mentally torture them. And he would cut off their best finger and add it to a collection. And he did this to everyone, men, women, young, old, it didn't matter. And it kind of was becoming his personality. He was getting really sloppy. One time, one of his victims escaped, and Jeffrey fled the situation. And somewhere along the way, he left the US and he entered the fog.
I think that's really cool.
I kind of like that. I would put that in S.
The finger box, that's S. The
yeah.
Finger box. It's like Dexter, but with finger.
Because it's like very like detailed, first of all.
Yeah, and like I do like the fact that like the whole resentment with like him and his dad, like him like not killing his mom, but like he died. She died because of him, and like that's like, because that's like real. That really happens, you know? Like, there's, like, resentment there towards, like, him and the baby, dude. That's crazy.
And I feel like serial killers, like, starting with, like, animals is also, like, an actual, like, realistic theme that happens, too.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. Okay, Clowns is actually pretty good. I like his story.
I think Clowns is an S, for sure.
So, Plague was Adderus, and she was left at a temple when she was only 5 years old. Like, she was abandoned by her family, and she kind of just held on to the belief that God had a plan for her, and she helped all the priests at the temple. And then eventually a plague surfaced in her area, and the plague really started affecting the priests, and she tried to do everything that she could with the purification rituals. And one day specifically, there was a ceremony going on, and a woman in the ceremony swooned and collapsed, and Adderus saw that there was black blisters on her feet, and she actually cut a toe off of her own foot and offered that to the gods, asking them to protect the woman. And a lot of people heavily respected this, and they started seeing her as their new priestess and calling her the High Priestess of Babylon. So she was highly respected, but eventually she caught the plague and she started having all these symptoms, and she was really ashamed that people wouldn't see her as this godlike figure anymore. So she was trying to conceal herself, and she tried to banish herself from the city, and she left the city, and a couple of her followers went with her, and they camped in a dark cave where eventually she made her last prayer, which brought her into the fog, and her body nor her followers' bodies were ever found, and no one ever really knew what had happened to her.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. So hers is actually kind of interesting.
I like that, actually, because hers was like she was just trying to like essentially like serve the city and like what she thought was right. And then, like, she became sort of like a god figure without wanting to be a god figure. But then when people were like, "Oh, she's not indestructible," like, fuck that.
Yeah, exactly. You know? And then also just like her like praying and stuff and going into another dimension, I feel like at least is somewhat believable. Like, whereas like some of the other killers, like they just like randomly go into another dimension for no reason. Like it goes from a very like normal story to like them randomly going into another dimension, whereas hers like has to do with like the temple and stuff in the first place.
Yeah, that's like Blight's was kind of cool too.
Clown's dimension thing didn't make as much sense, but yeah, I would put her in S. I would put Plague in S.
Yeah, I think hers is really cool. I really like that.
The twins are a pair of conjoined twins, Charlotte and Victor, and even though their birth was miraculous, it brought about a life of prosecution because they were so deformed. So people did not see them as normal and considered them a demon, basically. So they had to live a life undercover with their mom. They were always fleeing, and they weren't really allowed to go out and stuff, so people wouldn't try to hunt them down. And eventually their mom fell sick, so it became a burden on Charlotte to try to provide for the family. And at some point, they were actually found by a mob, and the mob killed their mom in front of them, declaring her guilty of witchcraft, and they had to watch their mom die, burned to death. And after that, they were taken into a temple where they were exposed to experiments for years. People were experimenting on them constantly. And the final experiment that was done on them actually killed Victor. And Charlotte picked up Victor and she ran away with his dead body. And for a couple of years, she was clinging on to Victor's dead body and just trying to find food and survive. And it was just a game of survival at that point. And then eventually there was a really, really cold night where she was about to die, and Victor kind of came to life and spasmed as a fog came over him. And she also, and then he ended up running, and Charlotte followed him. And this is where we kind of imagine that they went into the fog and was given another chance at life by the entity. And she vowed to protect her brother forever. So,
not gonna lie, I'm biased because I hate twins, so I'm like D tier. I'm just like immediately D tier. I think it's actually a cool story, but
actually, yeah, the thing is, like, this has that thing again of like how they randomly like went into the fog, you know, but the story itself is like pretty interesting, I guess, because it's like, I don't know, like the whole bias against them and stuff because of them being conjoined and like their mom dying in front of them and like them being experimented on and the brother literally being killed. Like, it definitely explains like why they would be so traumatized and like why they would be killers, you know?
yeah, for sure. The whole thing, yeah, like I think like the whole thing about her like walking around with like his dead body is just like, okay, that's like,
that's really, yeah, that part is like really weird to me. Like for years, it was very detailed though.
yeah, their writing's definitely getting better. Like,
I would
it's
put
just, like,
that
random.
in like, I don't know, definitely A or B. I'm just looking at
Yeah.
like, the other killers that are there. Like,
Honestly, I think like Clowns was really cool. I really liked Clowns.
yeah,
I think that like in comparison, I do like the story, but I don't like it as much. So I would say like A or B, like you said.
yeah, probably A, because I just like how believable it is that they would like become killers.
Yeah.
Which like Oni
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Deathslinger, like they were just like crazy from the beginning. Like they didn't have a
They were
reason.
just like,
Trickster is Ji-woon, and he was really a guy that enjoyed being at the center of attention. And he was recruited by Yoonjin Lee, a producer with an entertainment company, and he basically joined a K-pop band, and it was really a hard environment with a lot of stress, but he did enjoy it. But the thing that he didn't enjoy was that all of the audience's attention was focused across all of his bandmates. Like, the attention was not on him alone, and that did make him feel jealous. And one day an accidental fire broke out, and he had a chance to save his bandmates, but he chose not to at the last minute. And then he was kind of seen as a tragic hero because everyone thought that he tried everything in his power to save his bandmates, but they died anyways, even though he actually let them die. And he became a solo star, but over time he became a murderer, and he would find victims and he would torture them, and he would make them scream, and he would take these screams and put them into his music. And his music was becoming really, really violent, and the producers didn't agree with his music anymore. And he was getting really frustrated that he was being controlled and that he couldn't kind of come up with his own music anymore. So he took revenge on the members of the studio by inviting them to a private show, and then he incapacitated them with nitrous oxide, and he tortured them live on stage, and he took all those screams, and he thought it was the perfect performance. He did save Yoonjin for last, but when he went to kill her, the fog just came in and took them both to the entity's realm.
I think that
Basically.
the thing that bothers me about this is that he's literally just a boy who didn't get enough attention.
Yeah, like all of it
He
is
was just like-
yeah, attention based.
Like, woe is my whole life. I'm not the center of attention anymore like I was with my dad when I was a child. Like, woe is me, I'm a freaking pop star.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I know, like, one thing that a lot of people like about him is, like, the fact that it ties in, like, the screams of, like, the victims to his, like, music or whatever. Like, I don't know, is that actually, like, a part of his chase music? Like, I don't actually know.
If it is, that would be really, really cool, and then that would, like, change my mind.
I remember, like, some people saying that, like, in the chase music video.
Like, even his, like, laughing and stuff. I think that, like, it's, like, weird because it's, like, so detailed, but I feel like the overall story is just kind of basic, you know? Like, he just went crazy because, like, he wanted more attention, and then he just, like, started murdering everybody, and then he, like, decided he enjoyed it, and he wanted to, like, incorporate it into his music. Like, that's actually kind of scary.
Yeah, it's like the jump from, like, him, like, I don't know, like, him just wanting more attention to, like, letting his bandmates die. Even that, but then after that, him actively seeking out to, like, go and, like, torture people. Here's the thing, though, yeah, like, I feel like the story itself is not that good, but, like, it's cool in, like, how it is incorporated into his music and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's like a B because I think it's like not C because it's not that bad, but I think because it's like, to me, it is kind of like basic.
And, you know, all the other killers, like Oni and Deathslinger and stuff, that, like, kind of were a villain for no reason, are also in B. So I feel like he fits into that category. Nothing happened to him. Like, literally nothing happened to him to, like, make him, like, violent, you know?
Except he was just a jealous little boy.
Yeah, he was just, like, sad that, like, no one paid attention to him.